Good morning viewers and listeners. You are welcome in EduSet Network. I am Dr. Parveen Sharma, Associate Professor in Hindu College of Education, Sonipat. I have produced various books. My papers in national and international journals are being published. Various scholars have submitted PhD thesis under my supervision. Now, I am before you, we will be speaking on the topic memory and forgetting. Let us start with the topic. Well, a famous psychologist, Freud, says like this, we forgot to pay our bills, but we remember our checks always. What is it? Why we do not forget our checks and why we forget our bills? So, in this session, we will be talking on this issue, what do we mean by memory and why do we forget, what is it? What are the factors underlying this issue, why do we forget? And how to ensure good memory, because this is the duty, this is the liability of the teachers to tell the strategies to their students to adopt the right methods so that there is 100% memory on the part of the students. So, in this session, we will be taking all the issues related to memory and forgetting one by one. So, in the beginning, we will be seeing what do we mean by memory. What is the concept of memory? Learning plays a significant role in all walks of human life. We, through our specific power, collect experiences, preserve them and make use of them whenever required. In this psychological work, this ability of retention and repeating is known as memory. The term memory is used to mean an act of remembering some particular event. Learning would be futile if its products cannot be utilized by us in the future. Whatever is learned need to be somehow stored in the mind so that it can be utilized whenever required in the future. It means the experiences that we are able to remember is called memory. In psychological terms, the faculty of the mind to store the past experiences and then to reproduce them for use when required in later life is termed as memory. Let us define the other definitions, how the various psychologists has defined memory. According to Woodworth, a famous psychologist, memory involves learning, retention, recall and recognition. And on the other hand, Rayburn, the other psychologist, says the power that we have to store our experiences and bring them into the field of our consciousness sometime after the experiences have occurred is termed as memory. In the words of Ross, memory is a new experience determined by the disposition laid down by previous experiences, the relation between the two being clearly understood. And in the words of Stout, the ideal revival, so far as ideal revival is merely reproductive in which the objects of past experience are reinstated as far as possible in the order and manner of their original occurrence is known as memory. See, in this slide, it refers to the processes that are used to acquire, store, retain and later retrieve information, because first we acquire the things, then store, then retain and then retrieve the information. It is the storage of learned information for retrieval and future use, fundamental component of daily life. See, what is the use of learning some material if we are not able to store it and we are not able to reproduce the material when at a particular time we are supposed to reproduce it. So, if it will be futile if we are not able to store it and we are not able to reproduce it at a time when we require. So, it is essential that whatever a child, whatever an individual has learned, it should be stored in a proper manner in the mind, and the learner should be able to reproduce the learnt material whenever at a particular time it is required by the individual. See, we will discuss further what are the kinds of memory. First is the immediate and permanent memory. What is this immediate memory? Immediate, whatever we have learnt right now and we are able to produce the material at the moment after learning. And what is the permanent? When we give a time gap, after a lapse of time we want to produce the same material, then we can say that it is the permanent memory. And the second category is the personal memory, when at a time we are reminded of our personal experiences at a particular moment, or with the memories or association of some person, some event, some place, when we are made memorize and we are reminded of some personal experiences, this is known as our personal memory. And the another one is impersonal memory, when suppose we walk from some place and the memories or the events related to that particular place are reminded to us, that is known as impersonal memory. Then the third is the rote and logical memory. Rote memory is when we memorize something without understanding, without reasoning, without logical thinking, that it is known as a mechanical or as known as rote memory. And the in the same category, the next is the logical memory. When we learn something, we understand it and we have logical reasoning behind it, why this thing has happened and what are the reasons, what will be the consequences of that particular event, then it is known as logical memory. And the active and passive memory, when in a particular event the person is active and with the deliberate efforts one is reminded of the events, then we can say that it is the active memory of the individual. And the passive memory is when one is not making the deliberate effort to remember it, but the things related to it, associations related to it comes in the mind of the individual, then we can say it is the passive memory, where the individual is not making deliberate effort, but the stream of consciousness, it is known in the literature, the feeling stream of consciousness, when one thought from the another thought comes out, we say that it is a passive memory. For example, you as a teacher are teaching in the classroom and you give example that when I went to South Africa, then suppose in the class some students, they in their thoughts, in their imagination reaches to South Africa, and you are giving example of some study, and then you come to the next point, then the one thought from the another thought comes out, it is known as stream of consciousness. Next is the physiological and psychological memory. When we make experiences or we make experiments, then after the physical activity, motor activity, some events are take firm grip in the mind of the learner, we say that it is a physiological memory. And the psychological memory is this is related to our interest, our attitude, our motivation. Then these factors are, suppose someone is tired, then the memory is less. So, this is known as psychological memory. I am repeating the kinds of memory. First is the immediate and permanent memory. Second is the personal and impersonal memory. Third is the rote and logical memory. Fourth is the active and passive memory. And the fifth is physiological and psychological memory. Now, we come to discuss what are the factors influencing memory. As in the beginning, I have said that we never forget our checks. So, what are the factors which influence one individual's memory? First is the health. Health is very important. It is said that health is wealth. So, when any individual is healthy, physically and mentally as well, then will be able to memorize more, then there will be more and more learning. So, it is the first factor that individual must be healthy. If the person is healthy, will be able to do the work very well, will be able to perform the activities which are assigned to him or her very well. So, health is the important factor which influence the memory. Second is the attention. It is very important on the part of the individual that when something is going on, we should sit attentively. Suppose a teacher is teaching in the classroom and students are sitting there and they are attentive, then the topic or the content or the material which is being presented by the teacher will be grasped very easily, interestingly by the learner, because the learner is sitting attentive. So, it is very important to see. Sometimes students are not attentive and we just conclude the lesson was not interesting or the teacher was not effective and the method was not appropriate, whereas these factors were not working there. What was the reason? The student, the individual who was sitting in the classroom was not attentive. So, my dear friends, it is very important to know on the part of the students that one must be attentive in the classroom if the learner wants to memorize the things in a very fine manner. Then the third is the impressions. It is very important to know for the students that there are some impressions which are formed in the mind of the listeners. When a lesson, when a topic is going on in the classroom, teacher is teaching. So, it is very important what are the impressions being formed on the mind of the learner. So, what kind of impression are formed, it is important to know, because the impressions which are formed on the mind of the learner influence the capacity or intensity of the memory. Then repetition. Sometime we teach the lesson, students listen and a huge gap comes. And after a great interval, it may be possible, quite possible, that the students may forget, because after some time the material which is learnt, which is heard, which is seen goes natural by a natural process in the subconscious memory, in the passive memory, and without making deliberate effort one is not able to memorize what was done in the classroom. So, it is very important for the learners, for the teachers as well, that it should be recapitulated, it should be repeated after some time, because if it is not repeated, then the material which is learnt by the students will go in the passive memory of the learners. Then association. It is very important that the material which we learn should be associated with something. You know, I am giving you a very interesting example. Sometimes students confuse themselves at a very early stage in the spellings of principal and principal. So, I told my B.Ed students, when you go to teach in the schools to the beginners, you can say when they confuse their self in the spelling of principal, you say Rampal is our principal, in the manner that PAL will be the head of the person when we use principal, not the Siddhant. In this manner, by making associations, we can memorize very well and the intelligence. Moreover, it depends that the individual who is learning, who is memorizing, what kind of intelligence he or she is having, because we know by the time that intelligence is an innate capacity of an individual. So, it depends on the capacity or the intelligence level of the learners, how much he or she is able to memorize the concept which has been learnt by him or her, because sometimes we see that there are three kinds of students sitting in a classroom: intelligent and average, and some are below average. So, it depends on the intelligence level of the learners. Moreover, attitude of learner. It is said these days that it is not your aptitude, rather it is your attitude which takes you to the altitude, which takes you to the height. If you want to achieve your destination, if you want to have success in your desired fields, you should have a right attitude. So, my dear friends, it depends on the attitude of the learner, what kind of attitude he or she is having towards a particular concept. Suppose teacher is teaching with the proper teaching method and with the use of proper audio visual aids, and method is selected appropriate according to the level of the students, but sometimes student is not having a proper attitude to desired attitude or required attitude towards that particular content, then the learning will be less, memory will be less. So, it is very important to decide what is the attitude of the learner, because this is the important factor to influence the memory of the learner. Then nature of learning material, it is also important. What kind of learning material is being provided? If students feel that it is boring, the method by the teacher may be adopted very well according to the level of the target group. But if the students find it that it is boring, it is not interesting, or it is not useful for them, then there will be less memory. Method of learning, as earlier I have spoken, and all of you know by the time that there are different kinds of students, the individual differences exist. So, we cannot teach all students by the same method. We have to see what is our target group, where we are teaching. After knowing these concepts psychologically, then we will decide the method. So, it depends what kind of method has been chosen by the teacher and individual as well. As learner has to see which method is effective for me, which method is liked by me, and what kind of content I have to perform. So, it is important to know what kind of method is used, is adopted, because it influences the memory. And the last but not least is the speed of learning. Speed of learning should be genuine. It should not be very fast and it should not be very slow. It should be genuine. There is no set criteria what is genuine. The learner has to see himself or herself what speed will be genuine for me for that particular topic. And here comes the reference of the time management. Student has to learn the skill of time management, how much content I have to memorize within given period, and what kind of method I should be using, and what should be my speed. So, these are the factors. I am repeating once again. First is the health, second is attention, impression, repetition, association, intelligence, attitude of learner, nature of learning material, method of learning, and speed of learning. My dear friends, these are the factors which influence memory. So, students have to keep in mind these factors if they want to ensure themselves that memory should be more and more. See, what are the marks of good memory? We will decide here what are the marks of good memory, how we can see. There are different aspects. First, it should be a good learning. If we are not able to reproduce the learnt material and it is not stored, then learning is futile. So, it should be good learning, good retention. It should be there should be retention. If we have learnt and we are not able to store it, then there is no use, because if there is no retention, we won't be able to produce it at a required time. Good recall. So, the third mark of good memory is whenever we want to recall it, because we are needing that particular knowledge at a time. So, we should be able to recall it. That the third sign is the good recall. Fourth is the good recognition. We should be able to recognize well the concept, the event, the memory, the laws, the principles, whatever is required by us for a particular thing. And the last is the forgetting unrelevant things. My dear friends, it is very important to know how to forget the unrelevant things. I am trying to explain this with example. There is the capacity, we know that there is the capacity of the SIM card of the mobile or the computer. We have to delete the which are the information which are not related, which are not required. In the same manner, and the brain is having so many informations. If we want to store important things, relevant things, then we will have to forget the and we will have to delete those unpleasant or sadistic or undesirable feelings from the mind, because if we store all the unrelevant things in the mind, then how would you allow, because you have closed the door and so many like Chaukidar, they are sitting on the doors of the brain and they do not allow the good things to enter in the mind. So, what will be the result? The good or the relevant material will not be able to store in the brain. So, it is the mark of the good memory that we have to delete the unrelevant things from the mind. Do not allow, clean it. As we clean our room daily, in the same manner we have to see that we have to keep our mind clean, and we have to just get it away from the unrelevant things. I have said that good learning, good retention, good recall, good recognition, and forget unrelevant things. What is the nature of memory? Memory is a mental activity, it is a physical activity. First, I will explain how it is a physical activity. The memory traces are the basis of memory in the form of functional tendency. Suppose we repeat as a motor activity some experiences, some events, then it is a physical activity. Traces are formed on the mind, but there are some psychologists like Bartlett, Pyron and Lipson. They advocate that memory depends more on mental states like interest, motivation, etc., than on repetition of experiences. As the first group of psychologists, they say that it is a physical activity, but on the other hand, Bartlett, Pyron and Lipson, they say it is not a physical activity, because the other psychological terms which are related to the individual, like his interest, his motivation, his attitude, his intelligence, as I have spoken just now, his attitude and moreover his tendency, his intelligence. So, all these things they influence the learning or the memory. So, on the third aspect we say what is the nature of memory as a process. How the memory is a process? First we learn something, then we store it, it is known as retention, then the third is the recall, and the fourth is recognition. I would like to explain it. Learning, according to Gates and other, learning is the modification of behavior through experience and training. For a good memory, learning is a very important prerequisite. Guilford has correctly remarked, for an efficient memory, learning is more than half the battle won. If we are not able to learn, how we will be able to reproduce it? So, first in the process we say that learning is important, learning should be effective, learning should be efficient. In the process, second part is the retention. After learning, what we do, what happens, our mind, our brain gives the information. After learning, we try to store it. Retention is the factor responsible for preserving the material learnt. Learning experiences give certain programs on the brain which are preserved or retained first in conscious mind, then in unconscious mind through the subconscious. Retention helps in retaining the things learnt previously. James William believes that retention is a physiological quality given only once for all with his organization, which she or he can never hope to change. The following factors affect retention and capacity of the individuals. This is also influenced by many factors like nature of material, what kind of material we are giving. Methods of learning, methods also influence how we learn. Then the speed of learning, I have already explained, speed also influences. Mental set, I would like to focus on it. What is the mental set of the learner? Suppose as I have already spoken, teacher is teaching in an effective manner by using effective method according to the target group, and the teaching aids are selected very well, but the mental set of the learner is not there. He is sitting disturbed, suppose for example maybe belonging to a broken home, or peer pressure, or may not be physically well, or the lesson is not interesting to him, or he or she feels that the teacher is having a partial behavior with me. So, maybe due to this one reason, mental set of the learner is not in balance. So, this mental set will influence the learning or the memory. Then the thinking and reasoning. Thinking and reasoning also influence the storage power. Then the recency and frequency of impression. It is also to be known, to be understood, that the recent impressions, recent experiences are learnt well, and if the impressions after some time become weaker and weaker, fainter and fainter, then the learning will be less. Because my dear friends, we should know here in this reference that when we learn something, when we memorize something, they leave the impressions on our mind, but when after some time they are not revised, they are not recapitulated, they are not repeated, those layers on the mind becomes fainter and fainter, becomes weaker and weaker, and those experiences, those memories, those kind of learning material from the active memory, it transfers into the passive memory. So, it is to be known that it should be repeated frequently, and there should not be a big gap interval. Then the individual differences always exist, because maybe due to genes, maybe due to environment, maybe due to ideas or aspirations of the parents, maybe due to the examples set by the teachers, and where in which kind of community, which kind of race you are born, and above all the aspirations and ideals of the learner itself, what he or she want to become in the life, the goals, are they realistic or above realistic. So, all these things, they influence the retention. Then recall. After the learning and retention, there comes the recall. It is the third important factor of the memory. It is the mental revival of those experiences which have been learnt. It requires the reproduction of material, events or activities through learning and retention. If we have better retention power, then we shall be able to recall the things quickly. Of course, I have said that if we learn, we memorize, but if we are not able to recall it at a time when we require it, then all learning, all memory is futile, because when we require it, we are not able to recall. And there are two types of recall: spontaneous recall and deliberate recall. There are two types of recall. First, in the spontaneous recall, what happens if we come across a place and we have so many memories related to that place, so many things come in our mind without making the effort, because it is all spontaneous, so many memories. Suppose you come across, you pass by your college, you come to reminded so many good golden days and the so many memories of your friends, your colleagues, your teachers, and the roundabout happenings, all comes in your mind spontaneously. You do not have to make efforts. But on the other side, the deliberate recall is when you want to recollect something, you have to make effort, you try, someone meets you and he asks you, could you replace me, could you recognize me? You say, oh, I have seen you somewhere, but I am not able to recognize where I have seen you. Then the person says, I met you there in the conference, I met you there. Then the memories or some associations come your mind and you make effort, yes, I have seen you, I saw you there, we met there in the seminar. So, this is the deliberate recall. So, there are two kinds of recall. recall, spontaneous recall and the deliberate recall. In the first, you don't have to make efforts, all the memories, all the events come in your mind without making effort, and for the second one you have to make efforts. And the fourth is the recognition. It is the awareness of the experiences that has been previously known or retained. The individual is able to identify different objects due to recognition ability. In recognition, the subject is aided by a sense perception of the familiar experiences. It is the remembering of something present, identify something you have previously perceived. Full recognition involves recall of the circumstances of the previous perceptions. There are two types of recognition, indefinite recognition and definite recognition. Sometimes we recognize something but not for a permanent memory. After some time we may forget, but in definite recognition they turns into the permanent memory, and they have no scope of letting those experience in the passive memory. They always remain in our active memory. Further, after this we will come, how do we forget, how much we are responsible naturally or in a morbid manner. We will come to that aspect. And the factors of recognition, there are two factors I am mentioning, there are maybe other factors, but I am talking about two, confidence and mental setup. It is our confidence. We have to boost up ourselves, because if we are not confident, we are puzzled, we are confused, then the recognition will not be. So, we have to tell ourselves, I am confident enough, I can do it, I can perform very well, oh, nothing to fear, nothing to afraid of. So, confidence is must. Sometimes we know the things and we can do, but confidence is lacking, and sometimes I am sorry to say that the teachers or the elders or the parents or the members in the community discourage the children by saying, oh, you can't do it, then the confidence will be lacking. So, it is to be understood by all the stakeholders, maybe teachers, parents and the members, senior members in the community and our peer group members, that never discourage any individual, because confidence is the biggest factor in recognizing the learnt material. Because if we are not able to recognize the learnt material when we require, suppose you have learnt, you have memorized and you are trying to answer the question in the examination hall and you are not able to recognize, then the all learning will be futile. So, it is essential to recall and recognize the learnt material at a particular time when you require it. And the second one is the mental setup. Mental setup is also important, as we have said earlier that mental setup is very important. Sometimes we can do the things, but it is lying in our mental or in our mind that I can't do it. So, this way we are not able to recognize, already we have some presumptions that it is very difficult, or when we go to meet someone, already we have assumption in our mind, oh, he is ill-tempered person. So, already we have fixed in our mind, so we cannot find him in a talking in a good manner, because already we have assumptions in our mind. So, mental setup in learning the material is very important. Then the fourth aspect is memory as a product. We have discussed is a physical activity, it is a psychological activity and the process of activity, and the fourth is memory as a product. What is the memory as a product? It is the referring to the input of the sensory organs, and after encoding what happens, the material which is learnt or which is memorized by us is stored in the brain. But this storage in the brain should be a planned manner. If we are not able to store the memory or the learnt material in a proper manner, then all will be haphazard. So, it is very important when we learn the material. So, this coded material should be stored in the brain in a very well organized and planned manner, because if the storage or the collection of our experiences or the learnt material is in a planned manner, then we will be able to retrieve it when we are required to reproduce it. So, the product will be fine when we encode very well, we store and we retrieve. So, it is important. So, we have discussed the nature of memory. In this we have discussed 4 things. It is a physical activities, but the other group of psychologists say no, it is not a physical activities, it is related to our psychological aspects like motivation, interest, attitude, intelligence, mental setup and so on, background of the learners, aspirations of the learners and ideals of the parents, occupation of the parents, and the parent. These days we are focusing on the parenting style. It depends on the parenting style also. In the yesterday evening also I was discussing with some friends that how the children are sometimes very indisciplined. So, I hope parenting style also matters, because when you are alone in the house with your children, you yourself should be disciplined, so that directly or indirectly your children notice that how much disciplined you are. So, and after that we have discussed the process, and this we say learning and the retention and the recall and recognition, and in the fourth one that memory as a product, this is the encoding, storing and retrieving. So, my dear friends, this is the nature of memory. Later on we will discuss how to ensure the better memory. Forgetting, see in this picture, forgetting, how the forgetting is taking place in this slide, because I have told you that after some time it becomes fainter and fainter, and we are not able to recognize it. See, I am coming to it, how it happens. Forgetting, the lines are getting weaker and weaker. Then concept of forgetting. What is concept of forgetting? Forgetting is the opposite of learning. In learning, the child keeps a thing in memory, while in forgetting, she or he fails to bring to the conscious plane what she has remembered. In normal course, we find the process of forgetting quite unusual in life. It is helpful in certain respects and harmful also in other respects. When we forget painful things, it is useful, but when we forget useful things, it is harmful. And referring the same thing in the beginning, if we forget our checks, it is painful, but when we forget our bills, or you can say it is not painful. So, forgetting is sometime bliss and sometime it is a curse. When we forget our failures, loss of our loved ones or the bitter experiences, then forgetting becomes a bliss. But when a student forgets the answers in the examination hall, it becomes a curse. So, we will be discussing how the forgetting is a curse, how it is a bliss, and how it happens, what are the causes behind it, how students forget. See, let us see, first we will define how the various psychologists has defined the forgetting. Draver James says, forgetting means failure at any time to recall an experience when attempting to do so, or to perform an action previously learnt. According to Nunn, forgetting is failing to retain or able to recall what has been acquired. See in this picture, one of the keys to happiness is a bad memory. It is somewhat a satire, like it is said that if you want to remain happy, you should have a bad memory, in the sense that you have to forget the painful experiences, the painful memories. Ebbinghaus, a famous psychologist, I am showing in this slide, forgetting curve. Ebbinghaus, famous psychologist, says that when you learn a material, you memorize, immediate memory is 100%. Students feel that I have learnt and I have memorized, it is 100%. And after 20 minutes, retention is 58%. After 1 hour, the retention is 44%. After 9 hours, the retention is 36%. After 1 day, it is 33%. After 2 days, it is 28%. And after 6 days, it is 25%. And after 31 days, it is 21%. So, with this slide, we can say that there should not be a big interval after the learnt material. It should be revised, it should be repeated, and it should be recapitulated, because if there is a big interval, it will be forgotten. As I have said that sometime forgetting is a curse, because if this way a student forget the answers in the examination hall, then it is a curse. So, it can be said, it can be concluded in this reference that there should be a repetition or revision of the learnt material. I will take what are the kinds of forgetting. There are two kinds of forgetting. First is the normal or natural. As we cannot retain each and every incident, some are forgotten. This is due to the fact that with the passage of time or due to disuse of material learnt, we are likely to forget most of the material, because we have not revised it and there is a gap, there is a big interval. So, natural forgetting takes place. But in the abnormal or morbid or second type of category, Freud says forgetting is due to conscious repression by the subject. We do not want to retain unpleasant and painful memories in mind, so they are deliberately repressed in the unconscious. In this reference, the Freud, great psychologist, has given a very good example. He conducted a study on a lady where she forgot the face of her lover whom she loved intensely, but the boy did not respond to her love. So, what happened in the later, because it was a painful and bitter memory for the lady, and lastly the lady forgot the face of that boy whom she loved so intensely, because the feeling was bitter. Through this experiment, through this study, Freud wanted to say that it is a kind of morbid or abnormal forgetting, and moreover it is said that sometime you have to forget to forgive. If you want to forgive someone, then you will have to forget. So, in this sense, forgetting is essential, because if you do not forget the errors or the mistakes committed by the other persons, you won't be able to forgive that person. So, in this reference, one has to forget some bitter experiences, unpleasant memories. So, these are two kinds of memory. First is the normal, where with the passage of time one naturally forgets, but in the second one, abnormal or morbid, one tries to forget the bitter things, unpleasant memories. Then forgetting of things past. See, in this slide, researchers begin to unravel why our memory fails us and how to make us forget when we need to. Sometimes we want to recall, we want to recognize, but we are not able to memorize. Next, how can you forgive if you can't forget? I have said so. Sometimes you have to forget. Factors or causes responsible for forgetting. First is the retroactive inhibition. Forgetting takes place due to retroactive inhibition, the interference with retention by activities in which a person engages between the learning and the test or retention is known as retroactive inhibition. In controlled experiments, some other learning is introduced during the interval, and this is called interpolated activity. In simple words, retroactive inhibition is used to describe the interference in which the new material works in the recall of the previously learnt material, and the interference of old material with the new one is called proactive inhibition. There are two kinds of interference: when the previous learnt material interfere in the another one, then it is called proactive, and when the new one interferes in the old one, we call it retroactive inhibition. There are two kinds of factor which inhibit in the forgetting. See, in this, first learn proactive interference and the second is the retroactive interference. Factors which influence retroactive inhibition are similarity. Sometime we start a work which is similar, then this kind of similarity brings inhibition and one is likely to forget the previous work because the new one which has been started is the similar. Then the meaningfulness is not there, then the material will be forgotten. Degree of learning, how much level we have attained in learning, whether we have learnt it quite or we are just half the way. Then amount of learning material, how much we have learnt, and the associations, our associations reminds us the learnt material. Mental set, it is the mental set of the individual, then he forgets because he was not ready to learn, then he is likely to forget, because when the things are going on already it is the mind in the learner that it is difficult, will I be able to do it. So, all these apprehensions are already lying in the mind of the learner, so likely to forget. Simultaneous performance, sometime students do one activity and in gap time they start another activity. I noticed a student who was preparing for examination for subject and for GK. I noticed that for particular subject, suppose political science, the student was just focusing 2 hours for political science and in the gap time for 15 minutes was trying to memorize the synonyms for general English or the proverbs. So, my dear friends, if this is the case, sometimes that kind of second activity may interfere in the first kind of activity. So, we have to see that we have to start one activity at a time. Similarity of methods, sometimes similar methods interfere in between. Age and intelligence, this also matters what kind, how much you are grow, it depends on the age factor and intelligence of the learner, how much forget. Then passage of time, if there is a gap interval, likely to forget. Then lack of repetition, if repetition is not there, likely to forget. Overlearning, my dear friends, it is important to know that sometimes overlearning is the cause of forgetting, loss of material. Then distraction and doubt also is the factor for forgetting. Emotional excitement, sometimes students are very excited, maybe in a happy note or maybe in an angry note, then this is the reason for forgetting. Pathological forgetting is if you are in a frustration or you are in an unpleasant mood, never try to learn the material, because in that mood you are likely to forget. Degree of learning, how much you have learnt. The nature of the task, what kind of task you have taken. Fatigue, if you are tired, you will not be able to memorize, you are likely to forget. Now, we will see how to ensure memory improvement. Now, see in this slide, we are trying to memorize method of improving memory. There are few methods I have taken, whole and part method. Stephens and Hannawell suggested whole method, that we should follow the whole method. First we learn the material and then we do the question answering. Winch Penston suggested part method. He says that if the lesson is long, topic is long, we should divide it in parts, take one part and then just test or evaluate yourself and then take the second part. Recitation method, for the youngsters, recitation method is suggested, not for the adults. Space and unspaced method. Before suggesting the method, it is to be understood, as I have said, that it has to be seen what is the age of the learner, what is the intelligence of the learner and what is the mental set of the learner, what are the ideas and what is the task in hand. So, After seeing these things, we have to decide the method, whether to give space or no space, and how much space should be given. There is no psychologist, no book and no teacher who can suggest how much space. You cannot suggest in quantity that 2 kg or 2 dozen and the 5 meters. No, it is not such a kind of measurement can be given to the learners, but you have to see your capacity, how much space you have to give in that material, because you see your capacity and the task in hand, what are the goals in your hand. So, spaced and unspaced, there are two methods. Teacher has to ensure that for which target group, for which kind of material space should be given and how much space should be given, or there should be no space can be given. Then the part and progressive method. Part and progressive method is utilized in most of the time in the topics related to science, that problem solving method or project method. They ensure more memory. Some facts, you see, you are 50% more likely to remember something if you speak it out loud instead of simply reading it over and over. In this slide, I want just to tell you that if you speak it loudly, then it takes firm grip in your mind. Instead of simply reading, you can speak it louder. Moreover, I have read in one study that suppose there was a person who used to forget where I had kept the file. So, it was suggested in some study for such a person, when you keep a file, suppose you are keeping a file in second drawer of your almirah, you speak loudly, maybe no one is listening, you say, I am putting this red file of this particular document in my almirah in the second drawer, then it will take grip in your mind. No one is listening you in the room, but you speak loudly, my red file is kept in the second drawer of my almirah. It will take grip in your mind. So, when you speak loudly, simply reading, it takes 50% grip in your mind. In the second slide, writing something out is the memory equivalent of reading it 7 times, a good tip to know when studying. Sometimes students keep on reading verbally and they do not write because they sometimes feel lazy in writing. So, it is suggested for such students that if you read a thing, a concept 7 times and you write it 1 time, that writing 1 time is more effective than simply reading. So, it is for the students who just show the laziness in writing. They must write their points after learning, after memorizing. See in the next slide, making a commitment to exercise at least 30 minutes each day is also important. You make commitment to yourself and you remind yourself. Suppose your target is to achieve more than 90%, you write a slogan on a note, on a paper, and you just paste it on your almirah, on your cupboard, on your shelf, wherever you sit, wherever you walk in your room. When suppose you have a phone call, your friends calls you for a movie, then this slogan will remind you, oh, this is your target, this is your commitment. So, you remind yourself, this is my target, this is my commitment. When you speak this commitment loudly to you, then it will stop you from going to movie, and you will study, you will focus on your work. Then the next, in the concluding remarks, I would like to say, see in this slide, what is heard only keeps or retains in our mind 20%. I mean, if we simply hear, then the retention of this heard material is 20%, and what is seen, if we see only, then it is the 30%, but if we hear and we see both, then the retention is 50%, but after hearing, after seeing, and after hearing and seeing both, if we practice, then the retention, recalling, recognition is 90%. So, it is for the students to know that do not hear only, do not see only, do not hear and see, rather whatever you hear, whatever you see, you practice yourself. As in the last slide, I have told whatever you read 7 times, you write 1 time, that it will take firm grip in your mind. So, again, what is heard retained 20%, what is seen 30%, what is heard and seen 50%, and what is practiced 90%. Now, I am just repeating or telling some more strategies how to ensure more memory, because we have discussed how do we forget, why do we forget the concepts which we do not want to forget, and why we do not forget the things which we want to forget, like unpleasant memories, frustrations, unhappiness and our failures. So, to forget the unpleasant things, we have to make deliberate efforts, and to ensure the memory also we have to make the deliberate efforts. So, some more strategies I want to put for my listeners, for my students, that how to ensure memory, because it is the concern of everyone to memorize the concept and do not forget the things which are important. We have to make efforts, and some of the things are more motivation and proper grouping. Sometime we forget the things, for that we have to make proper grouping. Suppose there is a telephone number which we are not able to memorize. So, a long number, long digits we can make grouping. Suppose there is a telephone number 987-3306-903. Instead of saying 986-3006-903, we will be making the grouping. How? 987-3006-903. So, this way we can memorize after grouping the numbers. If we make the series, we are likely to forget, but after making a grouping, we are not to forget, we are not supposed to forget, and the numbers will take firm grip in our mind. And the motivation, we have to motivate ourselves how to memorize it, and what are the factors. For this, we have to see there should be no apprehension in our mind that this is a difficult aspect and I won't be able to learn it. So, my dear friends, I hope all these strategies are enough to make you feel, make you know that what are the reasons of forgetting and how can we ensure the better memory, what are the strategies on the part of the learner itself and on the part of the teachers, and moreover the parenting style and our deliberate efforts. I hope this lecture is useful for all, not for the students only, how to memorize the things in an effective manner and how to forget the things which are unpleasant. Thank you very much.